Welcome back to Old School Sports and our franchise hockey manager playthrough. A new series begins today. We are going to play in the NHL and we are taking over as general manager and head coach of the rebuilding Chicago Blackhawks. If you're watching, would really appreciate it if you subscribe to our channel, like the videos, comment down below. Certainly love to get input from everyone who's viewing as to what I'm doing well and, more importantly, what I could do better, because there's definitely going to be a lot of examples of that in this series. So appreciate the interaction and appreciate you watching. We had started a series with FHM with their new NCAA hockey capabilities. Those got tweaked a little bit in a direction that I don't love with the first patch that they released. So we're going to wait a few weeks till that new system is revised and more stable, and then maybe jump back in with a college playthrough also. But we have decided to go with the Chicago Blackhawks, a once proud franchise that has fallen on very hard times. Our only goal this season is to not finish in last place, so that should put what the Blackhawks are dealing with into pretty good context. This is a rebuild. You look at the cap hits we have with Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, two great players, although Toews, at least according to the folks at FHM, is not quite what he used to be. Patrick Kane's still a top player. And then we have Seth Jones signed for a long-term contract, hopefully is a good right defenseman for us. Other than that, though, most of the players on our team are in their late 20s and early 30s and aren't necessarily all that incredible. You can see the top flight talent is relatively limited. I'd say Kane and Jones are really the only ones that you consider top flight players. Certainly have some other guys who are interesting on the team that we'll be talking about as we go through this playthrough. But the Blackhawks were a pretty mediocre to poor team last season. The rebuild is expected. The big decisions that we need to figure out either immediately or certainly before the trade deadline this season is whether we want to re-sign Kane and or Toews, and if not, whether we want to trade them away and what we can potentially get for them. Clearly, it'll take a hit to our job security, which is starting at a level of 70, if we trade away either of those popular players, but it may still be the right decision to make. If you look at the power rankings for the NHL, well, they're not available yet because they're only available during the regular season. But the prospect rankings, we are not in a horrible situation with Chicago. We're in a total rebuild. We don't have a top 10 or even a top 20 prospect. But between Kevin Korchinski, Frank Nazar, Lucas Reichel, Colton Dock, and last but not least, Nolan Allen, we do have 5 top 100 prospects. So that gives us something to build with. The other two teams that I did consider playing were the Arizona Coyotes, which is another rebuild. The reason I didn't go with them is because, at least according to FHM, their prospect situation is even stronger with 2 top 10 prospects, so view the rebuild there as maybe a little bit easier. And then the Coyotes also have the advantage of they're going to have that brand new arena in a few seasons, which probably is going to give them a really big boost to their finances. I did look, and it is built into the game that they're already under construction on that. So from that perspective, they were another team that their only goal was to not finish in last place, but I think the Blackhawks might be a little more challenging given that the prospects are a little bit weaker, arguably, and the roster at the NHL level is definitely older. And then the other team I considered playing was my team, the New York Islanders. I did a long playthrough with them a year ago. The fact that they have the worst prospects in all of hockey was an attractant to me, makes the rebuild more challenging. The reason I didn't go with the Islanders is that I just did it last season, and when I kind of try to plan out what I would do, it's very similar to what I did a year ago with the Islanders, getting rid of some of the older players with bigger contracts, Anders Lee, Brock Nelson, Peugeot, Palmieri, Sezikis. I felt like I was just going to be kind of, hello, that's my dog going crazy over there. Felt like I was just going to be doing something really similar to what I did last season, which is why trying to find a challenge and trying to find the rebuild, we have landed on the Chicago Blackhawks. So getting to know our Blackhawks a little bit better. Clearly Kane, obviously an all-time great. The rest of the right wing position is not incredible. Tyler Johnson at $5 million in his early 30s for another 2 years. Doesn't seem like a horrible contract, but not a great contract. And then Blackwell, Johnson, and Entwistle. At least Johnson and Entwistle are young, but kind of look like replacement level type players on a good NHL team. Center, not incredible either. Got Dickinson and Domi, Taves, who we've talked about. Going to need to figure out what to do with him. And then Lafferty. And some of these players could be switching as we kind of go through the preseason and also take a deeper look at who we have down in the AHL. Turning to our left wings, Athanasiou, pretty decent player. Gonna have to figure out what to do with him. He's in the last year of his contract. After that, kind of similar to right wing and center, a lot of kind of replacement level players with Kara, Radish, Kachuk, and Karashev. Jones, certainly the star of the Blue Liners for us, locked up. Probably going to be regretting that contract down the line. Although, fortunately, I guess it does kind of get a little lower in the out years. So it might not be as, the $9.5 million a year is not necessarily optimal, but at least that number kind of dips when he starts getting into his early to mid 30s. Although I'm trying to think, I think it still may be the same cap hit each season. But he definitely stands out, and then you can see the other right defensemen with Mitchell, Regula, and Murphy. Regula is a decent prospect, so hopefully he will turn into something. Left defense, very weak. Johnson, Tenorti, McCabe, Jones. I think you kind of think about Rose as a prospect, but according to this game, he isn't a top prospect. And then Stalock and Mrazek, neither is really a great goaltender. It's a pretty bare roster, which is kind of the reason I chose it, because I think the roster is older and not that great, and the prospects were a little bit weaker, I think, than Arizona, and that was ultimately the deciding factor in deciding to play with our new Chicago Blackhawks rather than someone else in this playthrough. We'll see if we can build them into something that they were, 5-10 years ago. This was I think the closest thing we've had to a dynasty in hockey in some time. I don't think they won any back-to-back championships. It was more like the San Francisco Giants did in baseball, where they were winning every other year or every 3 years at times, but still a really nice run by Chicago. And it was 2010, 2013, and 2015. So 3 championships in 6 years is a pretty impressive feat. Obviously, Kane and Taves were both part of that team. Unlikely, I would say that they'll both be around the next time we're contending. Would hope that over the next half decade we can turn this team into a contender. Not sure whether either of them are going to be on the team 3 minutes from now, much less 5 years from now. But that's the big decision that I think you need to make when taking over this organization. Are you going in on trying to do a rebuild on the fly with those highly paid veterans, or is it time to kind of take the hit and turn the fans against you and move on from those legends and go with the youth movement? And it looks like we've got a pretty good coaching staff here. You can see most of the coaches and the various skills are ranked pretty highly. We're always going to look to improve the coaching staff and the scouting when we start off a new playthrough. So we do have about $1.8 million to potentially spend. So if there are coaches we don't want to be with us, we can certainly fire them, take the hit, and replace them with people that we think are better. So that is a positive, that we will have some money to kind of get a coaching staff and a scouting organization exactly the way that we want it to be before we kick off this playthrough. So I feel pretty good that we're going to have the coaching that we want for this team. The players is another case, as I mentioned. Stalock and Mrazek particularly are not the type of ability and potential that I would typically want for goalies in FHM, and the rest of the roster, with a few exceptions, is a lot of replacement level type players. Given that I don't want to say our only, but given that ownership has told us that the goal this season is just to avoid last place, I think that we can probably be somewhat aggressive in terms of starting to turn over the roster, working on a youth movement, and maybe setting ourselves up for a decent pick near the top of next year's draft if everything goes well with the lottery. I think that that's a reasonable goal for us, but I certainly don't want to ignore our performance on the ice so much that we become a 20-win team with 49 points on the season and I lose my job. But before we even think about what we're going to do with the roster broadly and what we're going to do with the coaching staff and scouting, it's time to kind of proactively focus on the big elephant in the room. And those two big elephants are Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. A couple of legends, a couple of future Hall of Famers, but we shopped both players right at the start just to see what, if anything, we can get from them. For Toews, we can only get a fourth rounder from Ottawa. Still, according to his ratings, a very productive, potentially offensive player, even though his performance has started to slip over the last few years as he's gotten into his early to mid-30s. I think it's unlikely that there's any way he's back with us next year. But for a fourth rounder, do we keep him around? Probably. The issue is he's looking for $13.5 million for an extension. So he's absolutely gone after this season. The question is just, do we trade him now before the season starts? Hello? So certainly don't need to make a decision right now, but unless his demand comes down significantly, he'll be gone at some point. There is an argument to just trade him now before the season starts, because typically, and this is my first playthrough in FHM 9, so I am making some assumptions here. But typically teams are very cap constrained by the time the season gets going, so it's going to be tough for someone to take on a $10.5 million contract from him. Whereas if we've got an offer right now, there's an argument to just hit the bid and get him off the books. Don't know that I want my first move to be trading away a future Hall of Famer, superstar, but unlikely that he's going to be back with us next year. And then that leads us to Kane, who is the best player on our team by far. He's the one who will be wearing the C if we do move on from Taves and keep him around. Still a dynamic offensive force, incredible physical abilities, great temperament and professionalism. Not the most incredible defensive player in the world, but certainly not bad for a player who's as good offensively as he is. So he's a more interesting option, and we did get more interest in trades with the Sabres and the Ducks both offering us second rounders and the Wild offering us a player and a third rounder. I do think there is a certain amount of symmetry if we were to send him back to his hometown team in the Buffalo Sabres to kind of conclude his career there. But when we look at what Kane is looking for in negotiations, the number's not that bad. I think it's a little unrealistic, quite honestly. $6.8 million a year for 4 years. Although we are in a rebuild, and he's an aging player who'll be in his mid to late 30s throughout this contract if we sign him to it. It's not such an offensive contract that we can't get it off the books if we need to. Presumably, if we look to trade him, there would be teams that he would be willing to go to. Actually, that's something for me to check. I would have probably seen it when I shopped him earlier. That's just going to give us the offers. What screen am I looking for? I think I'm just looking for the trade screen to see if there's anyone who he... Okay, there we go. Yeah, his exemptions from his no trade clause. So, he would go to a list of about 10 teams. So there would be an option to trade him at a lower salary, and he is still a big-time player. So I'm going to try to sign him. I know that it's a little unrealistic, I think, because I don't think he's going to be back in Chicago next season. He may not be in Chicago a couple months from now. And I think his contract is going to be more expensive than that, but I don't have control over that. I can only offer him what he says he wants. And new this year in the game, for those of you who haven't played it yet, is the Class A and Class B bonuses, which are the folks at FHM's attempt to kind of replicate the bonus structure of NHL contracts. I don't know how much I want to mess around with these. If I could take out a bonus for top 6 ice time, maybe I'll do that. I don't know if he'll go for that or not. I did cut the annual amount down to $6.5 million just because I'm cheap and I don't want to give him exactly what he wants, even though I think he's a bargain at that number. I really don't want to upset him, so I don't want to mess around too much with these bonuses. But we'll see if I at least take out the ice time bonus and cut the annual contract by about $300,000 a year. What does he think of it? The offer meets with his approval, but he does want all the bonuses that he had talked about. Oh, so I changed something there. Uh-oh. Oh, I wish I knew what I messed up so I could... All right, well, let's meet the demand. So that's the 6.5 with fewer bonuses. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll submit that offer to him. So maybe we will get Kane signed. I wasn't really expecting that we'd be able to get him signed, but at those kind of numbers, it seems like a no-brainer to me. Would absolutely be happy to have him back for about $6.5 million a year for the next 4 years. And as I said, we'll keep thinking about what we want to do with Mr. Taves. So we have finally turned our attention to our coaching staff, and we've added a few coaches, 3 of whom are now our skill coaches. Jimmy Waite is still our goalie coach, but brought on Jeff Ward to be our defensive coach. Pretty good with defense prospects and defensive and offensive skills. Brought on a new offensive coach in Jared Bowl. Really good at coaching forwards and pretty solid with prospects and offensive skills, and still above average in defensive skills. And then our new skill coach is Jimmy Wah. Good with prospects and really good with physical training. Also brought on a new trainer who is excellent at training. So hopefully that will help keep our people healthy. Also hired a number of additional scouts to really round out our scouting efforts around the world. So feel pretty good right now with the fact that we've got pretty talented coaching staff. Certainly some of the legacy coaches will probably let go over the next couple of years. We don't need 8 assistant coaches, I don't think. But felt no reason. They were all decent enough coaches that didn't feel we were losing anything by keeping them on the coaching staff. And obviously we've talked a lot about Kane and Taves. Looking at the other players that are potential free agents for us, Max Domi is a decent NHL center. Pretty strong physically, not bad in the clubhouse, pretty good mentally. Solid offensive player. His defense is kind of where he's perhaps lacking a bit, but for the Blackhawks, he's one of our better players. What's he looking for in terms of a contract? $5.5 million is getting to the point where I don't know if we need to make that decision today. I'm guessing that Andreas Athanasiou, probably a similar situation. Very talented physical player, really good offensively. I'd say a little better defensively than Domi. Probably not quite as strong mentally for the winger. $3.7 million for 3 years. That's definitely more something to think about from the veteran who picked up from the Kings by the Blackhawks before we took over. Again, I don't know if it's someone we have to push on right away to bring him back. Can definitely see who's available as free agents as we try to kind of build out this roster a little bit. Definitely some people that will probably be moving on from, you see the 1-star defenseman Jack Johnson and Jared Tenorti. I mean, they are, in the case of Tenorti at least, pretty good in terms of hitting and stick checking. Decent physical traits, but hard to imagine that there's not going to be someone better that we can find around Jack Johnson. Definitely kind of a stay-at-home defenseman. Got some decisions to make, and I think we can definitely improve this team. So we're going to take a look and just see what, if anything, is available out on the free agent market. And you can see there's no one whose ability jumps off the page, and given that we're right at the start of the game, we also don't have much of a scouting take on a lot of these players. Alex Formenton, though, is a 23-year-old, was with Ottawa last year, had 18 goals and 14 assists. I'm guessing he's not looking for a ton of money, just in terms of organizational depth. Might not be the worst person to try to make an offer to. Yeah, $750,000 for 3 years. Oh, the Senators own his rights, so they're just going to match whatever we offer him. Well, that makes it a little more interesting. Let's mess with the Senators. It won't even allow us to do anything. Thought we could increase the amount, but guessing there's going to be some fair compensation that we'll have to be paying to the Senators if we bring him on board. Would love it if there was a big-time goalie or defenseman out here, but you can see those are definitely areas where there's not a lot. Marc-Andre Gragnani, not all that inspiring as a defenseman. If you look for people with potential, there's some more interesting things out there. Samu Salminen, 19-year-old. Looks fine. It's hard to imagine any of these players are going to reach their full potential, but wonder what the contract situation with him is, though. Why there's a 5-star player out there. No, it doesn't look like we can even sign him. So am I looking at the wrong screen here? It says they're free agents. Signing not possible. Okay, well, perhaps I should have filtered for players who are actually signable. That might make things slightly more interesting for us. All right, well, that's actually good now that I'm only looking for signable players, because there's nobody with potential that's really young who's on the list anymore. So we did make the offer to Formenton. We're so weak at goalie that, you know, clearly Mikhail Rudenko is not a player who's ready now, but could he be a decent player on our organization at some point? Maybe. Do we have to send him to an entry-level contract? Just doesn't seem like there's anyone for us to really rush out and try to sign that's going to be a big difference maker. The other area where we might find something is the players on the trade block. You can see again here at the start of the game, getting ready for the preseason. No one that really jumps off the page in terms of their talent that's out there. But there are players who could potentially make us better. And I don't think we want to just completely bail on this season simply because our only goal is to not finish in last, particularly if we're going to be trying to re-sign Kane to an extension. I'm sure he doesn't want to be playing on a team that's awful. You know, Zach Aston Reese, gonna see what the Make This Work looks like. New feature in Franchise Hockey Manager this year. Jason Dickinson, pretty decent forward. And then Taylor Radish, another decent forward. Huh. It's I might trade one of those guys away for a defenseman, which we need more, but I don't think any of these players are big-time difference makers. Just kind of be making a trade to make a trade, not really fitting a specific need on our team. Might be kind of early stages for me to be thinking about revamping this roster, but when I do look at the back end of the players that we have right now, I am definitely scared about the blue liners, especially the guys on the left side. I would think that we could find someone who can help in that front fairly easily. And the other thing that we do have as an option is that there'll be players going through waivers as we prepare for the regular season too, and it's very conceivable to me that there's going to be some players going through waivers that would be able to help this Blackhawks roster. There's just really not too much available on the free agent market. Thinking about making an offer to Stefan Franti. Looks like he may have a little bit of potential, really just kind of organizational depth, though. I'm not sure what kind of contract we'd have to offer to him. Yeah, two-way, so we can probably work out a two-way contract with him with some bonuses. Contract demand exceeds our budget. Are we really in that big a situation? Oh, I did see this. I don't think I showed this. But in terms of the Blackhawks and our annual finances, we did use a low budget to save 22 points before I was in charge here. So I'm wondering if that's part of the reason, because it looks like we should be able to make an offer. I guess even that, I guess maybe we're slightly over the cap, but the contract for Kane isn't until next season. I'll wait to see what happens with Kane. Maybe once that offered contract isn't in there anymore and they figure out that he's already signed for this upcoming season, we'll have some capacity again. I don't really understand why we can't make an offer there, but probably missing something obvious. And good news, we did get Patrick Kane signed to that contract, so he is going to be with us hopefully through the rest of his career. Good to have him back on board. And now when we go to the free agent center, yeah, now we've got money for free agents. It was kind of weird that the offer that we had made to him, even though it wasn't going to kick in till next year, was keeping us from being able to make a contract offer. Kind of strange. And it does look like Franti is still out there just for organizational depth, just to do something. We'll offer him a contract. We gave you what you wanted. What do you mean you need a higher minor league salary? All right, how's that? There we go. All right, so we'll see if we can bring on Franti. Just not a ton available on the free agent market right now. Don't feel like I need to chase anything. I don't love this team, but I also don't feel like we need to be making any huge decisions here in the opening days of this playthrough. Given how weak our defense is, going to at least see what Alec Regula is looking for. Our scouts do think he's got the potential to still kind of develop into a pretty decent player. Not a Seth Jones level player, but when you look at our blue liners, he could definitely be a player for us. So what's he looking for in terms of an extension? $1 million a year for 3 years. I'd like to get you for a little less. I don't know if he'll go for a two-way or not, but we're willing to pay him $1 million in the NHL if we only got to pay him $75 if he's down in the minors. Not sure what he's going to think about that, but we'll find out. Wants $1.03 million in 3 years, so yeah, we can meet that demand, but we're going to keep in the whole two-way part. Let's see what you think about that. He's willing to think about that, so that would be good if we get him. Willing to pay him a little over $1 million a year if he's on the NHL roster. If he develops well, got him locked up for another 3 years, and if not, or if we somehow manage to acquire a ton of excellent defensemen, we won't be paying him too much if he's down in the AHL. And among the other guys who only have a year left on their contracts, Philip Kurashev, I'd say is a similar situation. If we can get him on a two-way contract, which is going to be doubtful, he's looking for $2.7 million a year. That seems a little ambitious to me. Definitely don't feel like we need to chase him on that, even though he is a young player with some upside on our team. Ian Mitchell, offensive defenseman. I guess he's really kind of a rushing defenseman better than anything else. You look at the skills for that. Not all that great defensively. I mean, he's fine, but he's not exceptional. $1.1 million in 3 years. Yeah, I just don't know if these guys are worth that. We've got lots of time to figure this out. We're going to know more about the roster as we get through the preseason, we get through waivers, and really start seeing what the actual roster that we're going to be playing within the season looks like. But clearly, if there is a decent goalie who hits the waiver wire, we could definitely use some help there. Definitely use some help on the blue line. Feel a little better about our forwards, but if there's a quality player, we certainly can make room for him. And we did get Regula signed to that extension, waiting to hear back from Franti, and then we still are also waiting to hear back from the player from Ottawa, and they will presumably match our offer to him, I would have to think. And we did get Franti signed, so that's our first new addition. Have a hard time believing he's going to end up making the roster. Certainly would think that he'll end up assigned to either the AHL or the ECHL. Probably the ECHL, honestly, to start, but we can have him in camp for the next few weeks. And of course, I'm just realizing now that I never actually submitted the offer sheet on Alex Formenton, so that explains why I haven't heard back from him. So if we offer him $800,000 a year, it's just not a lot of money. I just don't care. I'd like to have more players in camp than not. So it doesn't look like we need to offer them any compensation if he does come on board. Presumably they're going to match that contract, though. He's a decent young prospect. I can't imagine they're going to let a guy who scored 18 goals in 79 games last season, who's in his early 20s, go for that kind of money. Unless maybe Ottawa's in a difficult cap situation, but I doubt it at this point. It's still early. Yeah, they're well under their cap, so I'm sure they will match that. And Formenton likes our offer, supposedly. As I said, I'm sure he's going to get matched by Ottawa. Got our opening game of the preseason tonight at the Flyers. And in the least surprising news of the day, Ottawa matched the offer sheet we gave. Would have potentially gone higher on him if we knew more about him in terms of scouting, and I guess I could have actually scouted him before making that decision, but it is what it is at this point. We've lost our 2 first games of the preseason, got blanked 1-0 in the opener in Philly, and then we lost against Vegas 5-3 in our home opener yesterday. We've got another game today at the Islanders or the Rangers. Doesn't really matter. So we made it through the preseason, and it was fairly successful for a team that's only goal is to avoid being in last. We did lose our first 2 games to Philadelphia and Vegas, as we talked about. But then we swept the rest of the last week of September against the Rangers, the Penguins, and the Coyotes. Moving into October, we lost against Calgary, but then we finished up with a 6-1 victory over Winnipeg at home. So 4-3 record. Certainly if we play anywhere near that level during the regular season, it'll be a successful regular season for the Blackhawks from my perspective. So we've cut our roster down to 23 players. I wouldn't say there were any huge surprises. Obviously, Kane and Jones among the top players on the team. Hopefully we can get one last good year out of Taves. We'll see whether or not we need to deal him as we get closer to the trade deadline. Going to be combing the waiver wire very intensively over the next week or so as we prepare for the regular season. We certainly have the ability to take on some salary. Could absolutely use some help, well, everywhere, but particularly goalie and defense. And I tend to think there will probably be someone coming across the waiver wire who's more talented than the players we have on the 23-man roster at this point. Actually are going to have one change to the roster, and I did fail to mention that we also have a player that I had to put on the injury list. Alec Regula, the right defenseman, flexor pronator strain, 2 to 3 weeks. Probably will be on the big club when he gets out. Also, Nicholas Bowden. I don't know that he's really ready, but I don't want to put him through waivers either, so we are going to put him, the left defenseman, back on to the roster. Wasn't paying close attention to the fact that he had to clear waivers. So I'm sure we have a mediocre defenseman that we can send down. Maybe we just send Jack Johnson down. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. So we're going to send Jack Johnson down to Rockford and pull up Mr. Bowden onto the big club. Congratulations. And now we are going to get to see who else is available through waivers across the league. I guess we've got to wait one more day to see that. And not surprisingly, a ton of players waived, so we're going to be going through them. Interesting, Alex Formenton, who we made that offer to that was matched by the Senators, was waived. So he may be a guy for us to try to pick up. But a lot of decisions to make here that will hopefully help improve our roster. No one jumps out in terms of ability. Potential, again, there's a few more interesting young players there. Definitely a few goalies that could be upgrades for us. So we're going to spend a little time here and hopefully improve the back end of our roster a little bit through the waiver wire. And taking a look at our goalies, since we may need to be moving on from one of them. Certainly in terms of the goalie ratings, Mrazek looks better than Stalock. Stalock, broadly, I would say, is stronger mentally. Not so much so that if I had to move on from someone, I wouldn't move on from him. He's in his mid 30s. He's in the last year of his contract. I don't think Mrazek is a superstar, although that's his popularity rating. But I think that he is a better player for us than Stalock potentially is at this point in their careers. In looking at the goalies who are available, the one that certainly stands out a little bit is Anthony Stolarz. And if we compare him to Stalock, he's certainly more talented in terms of his ability to play the position. Leaves a little bit to be desired compared to Stalock mentally. That said, we are in the very early stages of a potential rebuild. Just don't see that we need to be keeping a 35-year-old goalie on the team who's not exceptional. So I think I am going to go in and put a claim on Stolarz. We'll see whether anybody else claims him. And we're going to keep looking. Hopefully we can find some help for our defense also. And there are a couple more players we're going to make offers or try to claim off of waivers. Alex Fermentin, who we made the offer to Ottawa that they matched, and then they subsequently trying to get him down into the AHL. He's signed for 3 years now, obviously. Seems like we don't know much about him. Kind of weird that we've been scouting everyone except him, but it is what it is. But we're going to go ahead and put in a claim on him. For our defense, Dennis Chalowski from the Islanders organization is not an exceptional prospect, but it will allow us to get a very inexperienced defender who just came over from overseas, get him down into either the AHL or maybe even the ECHL for a few games to start. So we're going to put in a claim on Chalowski also. Question is whether we also want to do an offer to Kiefer Bellows, another player out of the Islanders organization. Don't see him really being a difference maker, but he is younger than a lot of people we have on our team, which counts for something. Blake Lizotte. Just trying to look for guys who are signed for a couple of years. There's not really anyone who's all that exciting when you kind of look a little deeper in their skills, which you wouldn't expect a game changer to be on the waiver wire. But if we're able to get all three of those players, particularly the goalie, I think that would be the opportunity for us to kind of improve the back end of our roster a little bit. And there were a lot of players claimed off waivers. We did get all three that we were looking at. So we've got Dennis Chalowski for the defense. We also picked up Alex Fermentin after trying to sign him earlier. And then perhaps most importantly, we got the goalie in Anthony Stolarz. So I think that those three moves are going to definitely improve the back end of our roster. As I talked about, the addition of Stolarz means that Stalock is gone. I would think we're going to be able to get him through waivers to get to the AHL. I guess I could see I can't imagine there's going to be any people really interested in trading for him. Yeah, nothing for Stalock in terms of offers. That does not shock me. So we will try to send him down to the AHL. The acquisition of Chalowski is going to allow us to place the youngster that I was mentioning. Philip Rose came over from Sweden, obviously. Going to allow us to put him down to Rockford. And then last but not least, we did finally get our guy in Formenton. Just need to figure out who we want to send down to the AHL or trade away to make space for him. And the guy I think I'd like to move on from him, if possible, is Colin Blackwell. A versatile offensive player, but he's 29 years old, not that exceptional. Just joined the Blackhawks this past offseason. You can see he played with the Maple Leafs and the Kraken last year. Not, in my opinion, a difference-making forward. If we could get anything for him in trade, would probably take it. I don't know that we'll be able to get much of anything. Well, there's a lot of people offering stuff, so actually it'll give us an opportunity of seeing if maybe there's some random player we were offered who fits us a little better. Honestly, in the best case scenario, it's probably just going to be a draft pick, but we'll see what we can get. And we were offered a variety of players for Blackwell, fifth-round draft picks from a couple of teams. But we can get 23-year-old defenseman Jack Rathbone. Not really a stay-at-home defenseman, unfortunately. I do tend to like those kind of players. And as you can see, as far as being a defensive defenseman, he's really not all that great. A little more of a offense-focused defenseman, but he's another young defender. We need some of those. He is able to go down to the AHL without having to go through waivers. He may end up on the big club anyways. We're going to go ahead and complete this trade and then just need to decide instead of who we're going to cut from our frontline players to who we're going to send down among our defenders. And we decided to send Rathbone down to the AHL. So we're back to a 23-man roster, but we have made those 3 additions through the waiver wire. Season's going to be starting in just a couple of days. Actually, tomorrow is opening night. We don't have our first game until the 12th, but feel like on the margin we made the team a little better through what we were able to do with waivers. We'll certainly find out for sure when we get to the regular season. And with that, I think the Blackhawks are ready for the regular season. Added a lot to our coaching staff, added a lot to our scouting team, and ultimately added a little bit to our roster through a few free agent signings and waivers as we got ready for the season, and even a trade or two when all was said and done. So looking forward to seeing how this plays out. Again, my expectations for this coming season are not particularly high, but that's okay. The season objective is to not be last. They know that we're in a rebuild. We got a little bump from re-signing Patrick Kane and actually picking up Stolars on waivers. Apparently he's a very popular player, so our fan happiness is higher than it was when we started here. Team harmony is acceptable. Doesn't look like there's any real huge problems on the team, although interesting, the new fellow we brought on board, Mr. Formenton, is disruptive, so we'll have to see whether he is a high quality enough player to be able to stay on the team given that disruptive status. Right defenseman Ian Mitchell, also a little bit difficult in terms of being outspoken. And we got a relatively long list of unpopular players, which is not optimal, but hopefully with long-term leaders on this team in terms of future Hall of Famers like Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves, as well as Jake McCabe, who is a big-time stay-at-home defenseman in the locker room. Hopefully we can keep some of those more disruptive personalities in line as the season gets underway, and we'll find out how the season goes in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.